Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you for your commitment to this work. Thank you for your love of stories. Thank you for your willingness to return again and again to the page, to attempt yet again to make something that is ultimately separate from ourselves. Something with skin and bone and breath. Something with heart and yearning and truth. It isn't easy. This work isn't easy. And sometimes we have to pat ourselves on the back from time to time, just to tell ourselves that we've been doing a good job so far today. Well, I'm very proud of all of you. Because we're writing stories, and stories are good. And science fiction stories are good. And fantasy stories are good. This work is good. And I'm proud of all of you. I had a hard time landing on what it was that I wanted to talk about today. As I often do, I have several different maybe keynotes in my computer files. I get a thought and I write it out, and then I get tired of it and I write something else. I do this every time, and I think maybe I should start reusing these, but I don't, and then I write 10 speeches for everyone that I give, and then I wonder where all of my time goes. But I decided via circuitous routes to spend some time talking about circuitous routes, this winding road that brings us to the place where we are right now, in our writing, in our thinking, in our careers, and in our lives. As writers, we all know a thing or two about the winding road. The idea that we start with is not always the idea that we land on, right? The story that we end up with is not what sparks us at the beginning half the time. So it goes. For me, I learned to embrace the winding road a long time ago. For example, I sometimes get asked, where do your stories come from? And I usually respond with a lie. I have no idea, I say. I do, of course. I know exactly where my leaf boats and my love letters from the dead and snake ladies and undead babies and swamp monsters and love-lorn giant insects and sentient villanelles come from. I am a very strange person. Very strange things. And then sometimes I write very strange stories. Even when I was a little kid, I was the kid who looked for faces in the trees and ghosts in the windows. I was the one who knew that there were monsters at the bottoms of lakes. And that lipstick was poisonous. And that it was perfectly plausible to fall in love with an enormous beetle. But a strange mind does not always transmutate into the life of writing stories or the practice of fiction, because it is a practice. There needs to be something else, a spark or a catalyst, to bring us from the strangeness of mind into the practice of writing stories. And if I'm being supremely honest with myself, and by extension with all of you, I think that I can safely say that there are two major catalysts in my life that ignited this congenital strangeness of mind and spirit into that internal flame that is responsible for the writing of stories. And those two catalysts are as follows. Number one, actual ghosts. And number two, taxidermy. Why don't we start with taxidermy, huh? Long ago, When I was young and broke and full of juice, my husband and I loaded up our meager possessions into a rickety utility van that we bought from a Portland City auction and drove away from the West Coast, forever as it turned out. All we had to our names was a box of tools, a few boxes of books, some random camping gear, our adopted scrappy street dog named Herbert, and my rapidly swelling belly. We camped our way across the country until we landed back in good old Minnesotan soil to plant our family and start our lives. We bought a house across the alley from an impossibly old man who had a garage full of horrors. But I'm being unkind. The man was nice enough, though odd and lonely. He seemed to age rapidly, a visible, alarming entropy, as though he was, minute by minute, collapsing and dissociating, and if you timed it right, you could ultimately bear witness to the moment when he finally dissolved into dust and ash and air. He was unstable on his bent legs and four-pronged cane, with a wisp of white hair poking out randomly from his dusty cap, and a pair of orthopedic shoes that squeaked when he walked. He had papery skin and rheumy eyes, and a nose that had enlarged itself into a soft, sizable beak. He smelled of dust and formaldehyde and old grease and turpentine and tobacco. And he was a taxidermist. Back then, I was the primary breadwinner of my family while my husband was in graduate school, and my job as a middle school teacher didn't leave me very much time to get to know the neighborhood. As time went on, I got to know a few folks here and there, the Spanish-speaking kids next door and across the street because they loved playing with the baby. Excuse me. I knew the Native American family that lived on the other side of me because they had two really strong teenage boys who I often hired to help with yard work or snow shoveling or to walk my dog. But I didn't really know anybody else. I knew about the old man's garage, though. The kids told me about it in whispers. Don't come out after dark, they said in more than one language, just to make sure I understood it. The taxidermist will get you. Despite living across the alley, I never talked to the man much until one day in late June. I had just completed a year of teaching in an extremely rough and demanding school, and the stress of worrying about those kids while fussing about my own little girl and fussing about my overworked and overstressed husband nearly broke me in half. I wasn't eating enough, and I stopped sleeping. It took me 2 weeks into the summer just to learn how to laugh again. My soul felt like it had been pounded into translucency. I was walking home from the farmer's market, my baby on my hip, and a full bag of herbs and beans and peas and lettuce in my hand, and the weight of the earth on my back, when a voice came from the taxidermist's garage. When that dog of yours finally kicks the bucket, I'd be happy to mount him for you, he said. I wouldn't charge you nothing. What? I said. But then he changed the subject. I suppose you want to see the latest. I stared at him. The garage door was open, but the lights were off, and the work inside was in shadow. The latest what? Project, of course. The latest project. He blew out a cloud of smoke and it hung around his body for a moment. Come on, then. He pulled out a new cigarette from the breast pocket of his plaid shirt and lit it on the embers of the old like a phoenix. He shuffled into the garage. My daughter's head rested heavily on my shoulder, and I knew from the sudden heat of her body that she had fallen asleep. I've never actually had a conversation with this man before, but I was so curious. I shrugged and thought, what the hell? Followed him in. Do I admit that part of my motivation was my pure, raw animal response to cigarette smoke? Perhaps I should. I had quit smoking the day that I learned that I was pregnant, and I have not had a cigarette since. Yea, these long 19 years, but oh, that smell. Even now I follow it anywhere. I would like to think that my strange fascination, my lifelong fascination with taxidermy is universal, but I fear it is not. I've been transfixed by the impulse to take a thing that has died and preserve it in the context of a singular moment of life since I was a little kid. Indeed, I have distinct memories of school trips to the Bell Museum at the University of Minnesota. It's our natural history museum. And listening to my horrified classmates squeal and shudder at the glassy eyes of dead animals peering unblinkingly outward, the perpetually still bodies of predators poised in minute pouts. My reaction was very different. I found them beautiful, heartbreaking, and thrilling. They haunted my dreams. They still do. Inside the garage, half-done projects leaned against one another on overloaded shelves. Pelts dried on the walls, along meticulous drawings of animal skeletons, diagrams of musculature, analyses of malformations and eye growths, neck lumps, leg tumors, third eyes, cleft jaws. Never cared much for road taxidermy, the man said. Jackalopes and Fiji mermaids and other malarkey. Actually, he didn't say malarkey, but I figured there's children here, so I have to contain my language. I always figured that nature had a way of making things strange all on its own. There were dogs with 5 legs, cats with 9 toes, a heron with a 3rd wing sprouting from its breast, desiccated tumors and cysts and cutaneous horns crowded together in bins. He had a tenderness for nature's mistakes, even the cruel ones. Beauty may delight the body and delight the eye, but deformity touches the soul. I see what you mean, I said. But now, he said, gesturing to the back table, I don't know. I barely know myself these days. I can't start a project without wanting to make it fly. Every animal on the back table, cats, fish, squirrels, 2 young raccoons, had a pair of wings, either from a crow or a pigeon or a sparrow, angled forward and uncurling as though only just leaping into flight. He laughed, sucked on a cigarette and choked. It's a bunch of whimsy nonsense, of course, but still pretty, isn't it? They were. Thank you, I breathed, for showing me this. It's exactly how I've been feeling. How many times, I thought, have I longed for a pair of wings of my own? How many times have I wanted to give wings to my students, or to my husband, or to my child? Wings, I whispered. Wings, wings, wings. He took out another cigarette and lit it, even though the one in his mouth was only halfway done. I just like to keep him going, he added. I didn't know if he was talking about cigarettes or the animals. Maybe it was both. A good taxidermist has the knowledge of a naturalist and the compassion of a mortician. A good taxidermist delights in oddities and whimsy. A good taxidermist recognizes that in the teeming multitudes of abundant life are variations both inscrutable and strange. I am not a taxidermist, and I never will be, but I am a storyteller, and that's kind of the same. I know what it feels like to take a particular moment in a particular life and press a pin through its thorax, adhering it to the page. I know how to hold my breath. I know how to pay attention. I know how to find ghosts in the windows and monsters in the green. This is how we build a story. The curl of the lip, the bend in the leg, the wolfish gaze of a roving eye. Like taxidermists, we are beholden to observation and presence, biomechanics and mortification, the minutiae of life and the side effects of life. We watch, we form, we hold in place, and by force of will, we make it live. And then, sometimes, because we simply must, we give it wings. Now, as a fantasist, this practice actually requires more from the writer. For any speculative fiction writer, this requires more of us. All storytelling boils down to the art of paying attention, the art of noticing. All storytelling is the practice of radical empathy, the art of taking the self down from the altar of the heart and putting another there, to think as another thinks, to see as another sees, and to know as another knows. But the fantasist must do one thing more. The fantasist must create those threads of empathy and presence, of noticing and knowing, and cast them out beyond the known world and into distant realms. The undiscovered country, the world beyond our own. We do this for a number of reasons. Firstly, because magic is awesome. And if we can't actually live in worlds with dragons and sorceresses and towers and trolls, well, we sure as heck can build them in our imaginations and inhabit them in our own terms for a little while. But I suspect there is actually something more to it. When we write, we do so with an open heart. We fashion new worlds, and we do so with love. And with love, we create our characters. We know them inside and out. We share their joy and their pain and success. When their hearts break, so do ours. We laugh with them, we love with them, we weep with them, we bleed with them, and we die with them. This is the nature of this work. That's why it's so hard, right? But when we cast those threads of empathy into worlds that only exist in our imaginations, we ask more from our empathy neurons to stay connected to characters in worlds that we can never visit and can never see. It increases our capacity to empathize and connect in this world, this broken earth that we all inhabit and that we all love. The practice of fantasy, the practice of speculative fiction, the practice of everything that we are doing here teaches the brain to create more empathic spaces for the unknown and the unknowable. The brain on fantasy, therefore, becomes more capacious, more curious, more willing to accept the fundamental humanity of any and all outside of our own experience, our own personal experience, to make spaces for everyone on the heart's altar. This is why I write fantasy. This is why I write science fiction. This is why I write anything having to do with the strange and the weird and the unknown. To become more than myself. To become larger and more capacious and more kind. This is why I write fantasy. This is why I read it. And I hope this is why you do too. All those years ago, in the taxidermist's garage, I was not a fantasy writer. Indeed, being any writer at all was probably the furthest thing from my mind. I needed to keep my family fed, and my husband's graduate school bills paid, and my kid alive. And I didn't know it yet, but at that very moment, a brand new life was actually starting to blink her eyes and start the process of growing deep inside me. But in that moment, for a brief second, I had a vision of those wings unfurling skyward. I had a vision of those glass eyes brightening with life and knowledge. I had a moment where the world that I inhabited and the world where my mind rested were not the same place, but were connected by those threads of care and knowing and curiosity. I felt like the little prince holding tightly to his handful of strings as the birds flew him to a brand new world. The next day, I wrote a fantasy story by accident, and it was terrible, and you will never read it. And it led to a number of other equally terrible fantasy stories. This is also part of the job. You have to spend a lot of time writing really terrible fiction. Welcome, for those of you who are new. It sucks, but it gets better. With each one, it felt more important to write the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. To pin something wondrous, strange to the page. To take the remnants of thoughts and notions and stitch them together. Give them life and love and breath and action, and make them live. So, that is the taxidermy catalyst for me. But now let's talk about ghosts. I've known ghosts, actually I've known 3 different ghosts in my life. All women. I have never written about them and never put them in a story. And yet, they have left their fingerprints all over my work. I suppose I should have sat down, but then I wouldn't be able to see everybody. When I was in 7th grade, I was finally allowed to have my own room. This was a big deal. I was the oldest of 5 kids in a house in which we often had friends staying with us, or cousins staying with us, or even strangers staying with us, because why not? I had that kind of parents. Privacy is a foreign concept in a large family. For those of you who are in large families, you know this already. It simply doesn't exist. So when my parents finished a couple rooms in the basement so that my sister and I could have our own rooms of our own, I felt like I was in one of those families on TV. When a young lady had shouted at her parents and slammed the door in disgust, it was awesome. So I moved downstairs into my own room in the basement with the ghosts. Actually, that last part wasn't true. There was only one ghost, a tiny old lady that I eventually called Bertha. But before I called her Bertha, I didn't call her anything. I called her Fear. But fear has no name, and I had no language in which to speak it. I could only live with it. My room had a thin plywood wall with removable panels, and on the other side was an ancient octopus furnace, a beast that moaned and sang every time it kicked into action, which in the Minnesota winter is a lot. Which was most likely kicking breathing out small amounts of carbon monoxide, which fine might explain the ghost. Still, Bertha. She wore a lovely wool skirt that stopped demurely under her knees and a matching jacket and sensible shoes. She had thick stockings, blue gloves, and a smart hat that framed her face, and she was old, way older than my grandparents. She sat at the end of my bed night after night, her hands folded on her knees, her ankles crossed discreetly, and a look of anticipation on her face. She watched me all the time. She watched me when I crawled under the covers. She watched me when I went into the closet. She watched me when I got up to turn on another light. I slept with the lights on for 3 years. And for 3 years, Bertha watched. After a while, I came to anticipate her. Sometimes she would remove her gloves, tugging one finger at a time, and lay them next to her as she sat on the bed. Her fingers were as gnarled as trees. Sometimes she would remove her hat, revealing her flower-white hair, braided tightly and wound like a snake around her small skull. After a while, I began to appreciate her. After a while, I began to love her. And then the furnace died, and my parents replaced it with something new and modern and presumably unpoisonous. I never saw Bertha after that, and my heart broke. Maybe she was connected to the furnace. Maybe she was a byproduct of poisonous gas. It actually doesn't even matter. I still missed her. I didn't see another ghost for a long time after that. Whoops, sorry, I changed things around. Oh yeah, I'm gonna still read this part. Okay, I'm gonna read this part. It was 4 ghosts and I had to take one out because it was getting too long. Okay, I didn't see another ghost for a long time after that. It was well after high school and college when I lived in a rental house in Portland, Oregon with my boyfriend and 2 other housemates. The house next door was owned by a guy who was a pack rat, the pathological kind that you see on television. Every window was packed with junk. The yard was an overgrown jungle of sapling trees and tangled shrubs. The mailman didn't even venture up the narrow path that served as a walkway, so I assumed that no one even lived there. And then one day, I saw a lady at the window. She was young, maybe 20, in a floral dress, a different dress every day. I saw her every evening for 2 weeks. But not for very long. I just saw her standing by the back window, her head on the glass, staring out. It's always at dinner time. So I would notice her right when I started cooking, and then she was gone by the time I put dinner on the table. I assumed she must be a relative. Maybe somebody was finally getting that house back in order. And then one day the ambulance came, and a couple of fire trucks. The paramedics swarmed the overgrown yard, brandishing chainsaws and loppers, cutting a swath to the house. The house was so jammed with junk, they couldn't even make it through the front door, and they certainly couldn't get a stretcher into where the guy was. They cut a hole through the wall and came out, dusty and white as ghosts, bearing the man away. He was unconscious, but alive. The next day, a woman, maybe about 40 years old, showed up at the house with a couple of guys in trucks and a couple more guys with yard equipment and started clearing brush and hauling junk. I introduced myself and asked how my neighbor was. She said it was a close call, but that he would be fine, and that it was a blessing that they had reconnected because she and her father had been estranged for many, many years. He had no one, the lady said. No one visited him. No one? I said, are you sure? Positive, she said. The door was inoperable. He was only eating because of the canned goods that he collected last time he thought the apocalypse was coming. Well, I think I saw someone at the window for the last few weeks. The young woman, your sister, maybe? I'm an only child, the lady said, confused. There's no one else. And certainly no one has visited. They couldn't get inside. Well, I said, I saw someone in the house in the window at the back bedroom. She stared at me like that was crazy. There's no way that can be right, she said. The back bedroom is packed solid, floor to ceiling. Not even a rat could get in there. to say that the only reason why she came by at all, and the reason why she called the paramedics, and the fact that she had a strange message on her phone. She left no name, no phone number, no contact information, nothing. She just said, "See your father. He'll die if you don't see him. He's dying right now." The thing is, that voice sounded almost exactly like my mother's voice. It was exactly like her. But, whatever. She's been dead since the Reagan administration. She showed me a picture of her parents on their wedding day. Her mother wore a floral dress. My current house had a ghost. She lived in the basement. I called her Evelyn, and I don't think she minded it. I never saw her, but from time to time, I would catch a whiff of lilac perfume and talcum powder and aquanet, none of which I had ever bought or owned. But there it was, a hint, a cloud, and then it was gone. And here's another thing. Evelyn did laundry. I'm not making this up. I'd go downstairs, move the clothes from the washer to the dryer, and then I'd come back an hour later and everything would be folded in a basket. Not every time, mind you. Just every once in a while. Evelyn did as she pleased. Anyway, as my family grew and our need for space became critical, my husband and I decided to finish the basement, put in a family room, space for Legos and games and maybe a dartboard and an office. And we stood in the basement, pacing out the space and making the plans. And I heard a distinct voice in my left ear say, "Oh, I think not." And then I smelled lilac, and then Evelyn was gone. I have to do laundry on my own. And she never came back. It's very sad. It's a sad story. I've never written about these ghosts. And yet, they find their slanted way into my stories nonetheless. A hint, an echo, a vanishing mist, that moment of astonishment, the things we catch in the corner of our eye as we speed down the road, that winding road. Our stories, by their very nature, are a byproduct of our journey down this winding road. We walk, we observe, we wander and stumble, and sometimes we take the wrong turn at the fork. We collect strangers and vistas and maps. We pause for a long time, just taking it in. We get tired, and we journey anyway. We change the landscape, and by doing so, we find that we are ourselves irrevocably changed. This is what it means, I think, to be a storyteller, to be a noticer, a journeyer, a collector, a dreamer. The sort of person who buys magic beans and rubs a lamp and decides to hand our last coin or our last loaf of bread to a beggar, because you never really do know, do you? You never really know where this thread is going to lead you or where the story is going to land. The journey is long. The road is winding, and we don't always know where we're going. Doesn't matter. You'll know it when you see it. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we probably have time for questions. Is that right? Who's in charge? We have time for questions? Okay, great. We'll do it. Anything you guys want to know about, just like, if you want to, just about writing in general, about like advice, or just, sort of like career stuff is fine. Yeah.
want to know why you never wrote those ghost stories.
Oh, good question. I don't know. It isn't entirely true that I haven't written a ghost story. I wrote a story called Open the Door and the Light Pours In that was published in Clockwork Phoenix a few years ago, and then was republished in my... I have a collection of short stories that came out last year called Dreadful Young Ladies. So it's in that. It's none of these ghosts. It's a very different sort of ghost. My grandmother-in-law was a war bride, and my grandfather-in-law was shot down at one point, and he survived, but she didn't know for 3 months, and she kept writing him letters every day, and that notion of writing letters and perhaps getting something back from somebody who may or may not be alive was very compelling. So that's what I wrote about. So, great question. Who else? Yeah?
How long did it take you to write The Girl Straight News? What was your process, and what did you write before that?
Oh, great question. So she asked me how long it took me to write Girl Who Drank the Moon. Here's the thing, every book has its own time frame, and there's really no way of guessing what it's going to be, even if you've done it before. So my first book, for example, Most Interesting Story of Jack, took me about a year and a half to write. Iron-Hearted Violet took me 8 months. Witch's Boy took me 2.5 years. And Girl Who Drank the Moon is my fastest book, and that took me 5 months. Just sort of poured out. The book that I'm writing now, called The Sugar House, which is a retelling of Hansel and Gretel set in South Minneapolis, in which the diabetic kid saves the pig. I've been working on that book for over 3 years now. So some books are harder to do. Some just take longer. So anyway, in my process, Girl Who Drank the Moon was a little bit different. I always write my first drafts longhand, but I actually needed to write Girl Who Drank the Moon very quickly because we were running out of money, and I wanted to get paid, and so I didn't. So I wrote probably the first half of that longhand, and then switched up because I really knew where it was going, and it was moving at a pretty fast pace, and typing is actually faster. I do prefer writing longhand. It's very quiet. Computers are loud, and also you're going back and forth with the midline of the brain, so it's very it triggers both sides. You get a lot. There's all kinds of brain research because I'm kind of a brain research nerd. So anyway, as to why that's a good idea. So anyway, we can talk about it later if you want to know. I don't know. Who else? Yeah, you're gonna have to stand up and talk really loud.
So what's your writing routine? Do you have a group or?
Really good question. So she asked about my writing routine. It changes all the time because my life changes. When I was first beginning, my kids were small, and I wrote from 4 to 6 in the morning, and then got my kid up to get ready for kindergarten. And that I can't recommend that. I wrote pretty uniformly terrible fiction, but maybe I would have anyway. I don't know. Also, whatever. I almost lost my mind. So once all of my kids were in school, I do have an office, and if I'm in heavy research mode, I don't write at home. I go over to the public library in downtown Minneapolis, which has really great workrooms, and also just great research opportunities, so I like to do that. But whatever, my job as an author is not my full-time job. I also, have to help out with Cub Scouts and, volunteer at the library at school and things like that. So, or if I've got to take a kid to the orthodontist, and so things like that will get in the way. So I don't really have, there's some people who are they basically have banker's hours, and they're very sort of specific about that. I'm not like that. I'm much more loosey-goosey. I do try to write every single day. I try to write longhand every single day, even if it's not on the project that I'm working on. So, anyway, great question. Who else wants to know a thing? Yeah? Oh, great question. So she asked me what was my favorite character to write. Oh, Furion, 1,000,000%. I am Amphibian, like that is like that's my personality. Like I like everybody to be part of the group. I'm 1,000,000% Hufflepuff. Like I just am that all the time. And sometimes I'm over enthusiastic, all kinds of stuff. And so yeah, period for sure. But I'll tell you what. I was worried at one point in the revision process that I needed to take him out of the story. I was worried that he was too disruptive, and I mentioned that to my editor, and she said, "Oh, don't you dare!" It's like, okay, good. I mean, as long as you're fine, then I'm fine, so I'll just keep on going. So it was just an example of me overthinking. Anyway, who else wants to know a thing? Yeah.
Do you outline or do you just start?
So I don't outline, but I don't just start writing either. So all of my books start with a box. I have to think about a book for a long time before I can start writing it. And the box is helpful because it's this sort of physical place and space where I can just throw things in. And so it's a very loosey-goosey process. It's very, I'm a very esoteric person, so it's an esoteric process. I will throw in character descriptions, I will throw in dumb drawings, I will throw in sentences that please me, I will throw in paragraphs that please me. I can't start until I really have a good understanding of the characters, and I can't start until I have an idea of what the texture of the language will be, how it will lay in the ear, how it will feel in the mouth, how it resonates in the chest when you say it. There's a line in Growing the Moon about the elders, and sort of like this situation of haves and have-nots, and how everybody in town is very poor, where all the families of the elders have grown fat and hale and shining on a diet of beef and butter and beer. I needed to write that sentence before I could write the story, because I was like, oh, that's it. That's the sound I'm going for, right? So when I begin, I have a good sense of what the central dilemma is. I have a good sense of where generally I think the characters are going, where I think the story is going to land. I'm always wrong, and I have a really good sense of the place. I also can't start until I really understand the ground under my feet, what the landscape looks like, what it feels like, what the natural world is like. So, anyway, great question. Yeah.
Could you repeat the thing about how it lays in the ear?
Oh, yeah. So fun fact about Kelly Barnhill, I am not a visual thinker, and I'm also on the visual spectrum. I love my 3 children. I can't pull up their faces in my head. Okay, I have 5 minutes for the life of me, but I have their voices in my head all the time. And so for me, my brain works hourly in terms of sound. It also works through senses. So that's just how I experience my imagination, it's how I experience stories, which is why they're highly sensory. And so how language sounds and how language sounds out loud is really important to me. I do all of my revisions out loud. And again and again and again. I perform it all to my dog, Sirius Black. He's a wonderful listener. He's also a very needy Labrador. He's nothing like his namesake at all. He wouldn't last 5 seconds in Azkaban. So, but yeah, so the texture of language is really important to me. How the language sounds, how it feels when you say it. Like, because we use our whole body to talk, right? So we feel language in our shoulders, we feel language in our chest, we feel language in our stomachs. We just feel ourselves talking. So, or at least I do, because my brain is odd. So, anybody else want to know a thing? Yeah. Yeah, you can start with beard.
What are the books that are called Stop Reading?
Oh gosh. So I reread Howl's Moving Castle every single year. I reread Jane Eyre every single year. So those are big ones. ones for me. When I was a kid, I was an Oz kid, 1,000,000%. It was my obsession with Oz and my obsession with fairy tales that taught me how to use interlibrary loan in 4th grade. So those have all really stuck with me a lot, and you can just whatever, like, oh, why is Billy Barnhill so strange? Oh, well, there we go. But also Terry Pratchett. The Tiffany Aching series, I think, is one of the most, particularly Hatful of Sky. Having a child going off to college has that book has hit me in all kinds of new and interesting ways. One last question before we go? Okay, I think we're good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.